Good evening, everyone. I call the City Council May 26, 2022 special budget meeting to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. McAllister?
Here.
Mr. Foley? Here. Mr. Gephardt?
Here.
Mr. Howe?
Here.
Mr. Lattiser?
Here.
Mr. McElroy? Here. Mr. Ricks?
Here.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? Here. 9 present.
Thank you. Councilman Lattiser, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the balls bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Good evening, everyone, again. So this evening before us, we have 2 items, PCR 6522 and PCR 6622. So just for everybody's, want to give the roadmap for tonight. First up is PCR 6522. This is relative to transfers, supplements, appropriations, and emergency appropriations. So what we will do is we will get a motion, we will get a second, and then I will ask members of the council if they have any amendments to make. The process will be you will state what the amendment is. You will detail if you want to, you identify the line item that you are addressing, whether you want to increase it or decrease it, and where the funds would come from. Then we will pause. We will ask for a second. If there is a second, then we will go back to the original council person who then will detail the reason why he or she is putting forth that amendment. So that is the process on that. Then after we do PCR 6522, then we will go to PCR 6622. And at that time, members of the council can give their overall statements on the budget before we vote on the budget. So the first part is where everyone has an opportunity to offer amendments. We will vote on those amendments, and then once PCR 6522 is completed, when PCR 6622 comes up, that's when everyone have an opportunity to speak on the budget as a whole. All right. So. Okay, so I'm looking for a committee report. It was a committee report from Finance on PCR 6522.
Thank you, Mr. President. Committee votes favorable action with public hearing comment.
And for action, Councilman Howe?
Favorable action.
Second by Councilman Foley. All right, so now we are open. All right, are there any members of the City Council who would like to make any amendments at this time to the budget? Councilman Gephardt.
Thank you. I have one. It is small, but important. I would like to amend line 6360, Department of City Planning Professional Services, to reduce that line by $4,500, and to amend line 6388, Land Trust, to increase that by $4,500. Thank you.
Okay, so that is the amendment. We will need I'll ask for a second, and if we get a second, then we will go back to Councilman Gephardt. Do we have a second? Second by Councilman Ricks and Councilman Foley. Go ahead, Councilman Gephardt.
Thank you.
And can you just give the page number?
Oh, it's page 4040 in the general fund budget. So the idea here, and I did speak with the administration earlier today. They indicated that, you know, there's already dollars embedded in the planning department budget for these activities, but I think it's important, as we've done some research related to the proposed open space bond, and to the interest many of us share in conservation. The preliminary steps in order to identify and plan for bringing lands into conservation involves title searches and land surveys and all that type of activity. As we were doing that research, we've identified that there's already $2 million available on an existing open space bond that was passed by the voters, that the city has access to. So in order to, in the future, be able to tap into that, we have some homework to do on various parcels that may be or may become available. And so this would be a small contribution towards doing some of that work. So appreciate your support.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Councilman Lattiser.
Yes, the question through the chair. You wanted to transfer 4,500 to what line item, please?
Go ahead, Councilman Gephardt.
It's from line 6360 on page 40
Got that, yes.
to line 6388.
388. So how has the land trust been operating up to this point?
Sorry, may I respond? Thank you. It is my understanding that what's been allocated to land trust so far annually is just dues to attend a conference, and they work with the planning department when parcels are identified to help do this research. And that was what the administration indicated to me earlier today, is that, you know, they're happy to support in that. So I think the funds are there, but I do think that this sort of enables the land trust to get active on some of this stuff. As I think many of us know, it is a very active board, and they are definitely looking to help. And I think that this signals that, you know, we're there to support them, that we value the efforts of conservation, and gets the conversation started about the potential of tapping into some of those existing open space bond funds and making them available to do good work for the city. Thank you.
So essentially, what you're asking us to do is to give them a $5,000 checking account with no oversight by this council.
Through,
I
through the
think that
president.
was directed to Councilman Gephardt.
Was that a question? Well, if they were to want to make an expenditure that required our approval, then we would have such oversight. Short of that, this is the oversight right now.
But
Through the president, if I may.
if I may
Yeah,
follow up.
continue.
So right now, all the departments in this city, if they have a financial request, 2,500 or less, they have to go through the purchasing agent, and she has to approve it. Anything over 2,500 would have to come to the city council for approval. So as I see this happening, this would essentially be giving them a $5,000 checking account to operate of their own free will without oversight from either the purchasing agent or the city council. I understand the work that the land trust does. Been my career supportive of open space, et cetera, but obviously this is the first I'm hearing of this. So as I rationalize it, this isn't something I'm going to be able to support, because it's going to be just doing just what I said. It's going to be giving them a $5,000 checking account to use at their discretion without any oversight from either the purchasing department or the city council. I'm not going to be able to support that. Thank you.
I'll just finish up to say that I believe any monies in this budget would fall under all of the financial controls and oversight that all the rest of the money in the budget would fall under. So I don't see how this is different, but to each his own.
With that said, I would defer to the city solicitor. I'm sorry, the council solicitor.
Mr. Walsh?
It's my understanding of the amendment as offered by Councilman Gephardt is shifting resources that currently exist within the Department of City Plan, specifically from their professional services budget to the land trust budget. It's my understanding that traditionally the land trust would have to work through the resources available to at the planning department as is. But nothing in this would exempt them from any of the procurement laws that are currently followed, regardless of who's holding the actual funds.
So they would still have to go through the purchasing agent for approval under 2,500 and come to us over 2,500?
It's my understanding that it would operate no differently than when the planning department seeks to allocate these funds.
So the answer is yes.
Yes, it would
Okay.
follow all applicable procurement regulations that we have.
So Councilman Gephardt, another question I have is, was this a request by the Land Trust Committee or an individual from the Land Trust Committee?
This is a request from the committee, and it's been a pain point for that committee for many years, that their activities are limited because to actually pursue some of the work that the charter enables them to do, their hands are sort of tied in their ability to, get enough information to make a compelling proposal back to the city and to get a willing landowner and to get all the boxes checked before they can actually bring it to us. So, if there were a parcel, let's say in your neighborhood, that would be a good candidate for preservation, the land trust could in conjunction with the planning department, get the ball rolling on some of the activities necessary. This is what, we've heard from them, I think both through public comment, also I think individually, and various emails that I've seen sent that I believe went to several of us from both members and on behalf of that committee, that they're just looking to be active and to tee up projects for our discussion and approval where appropriate. So this is just an effort to support that.
And do you know if the Land Trust Committee has discussed this with the mayor, or was this a discussion that you had with the mayor?
I am not privy to the conversations that they had.
Councilman, I am going to let the administration speak
Yeah.
on any.
Yeah, I'd
after
like
the
to hear
council.
from someone from the administration on this.
Sure. Before, I'm going to give everyone in council a chance to speak, and then
Okay.
Councilman Ricks.
Thank you. A couple of quick topics. So the first one, as to oversight, let's see. Can everyone hear me now? Very good, thank you. So a couple of topics here. The first one, to address the oversight concerns. So it's my understanding, similar to the council solicitor and Councilman Gebhardt, that every penny would be subject to the same oversight as spending by any department. And we've already heard as to the amounts under 2,500 and over 2,500, the process there that we're all very familiar with. But in addition to that level of oversight, the land trust is subject to a couple of additional levels of oversight that are unusual among departments. So as to the land trust, the city council has a certain level of oversight in that every member of the land trust is appointed by this city council. So if the land trust is acting irresponsibly or going in a direction that we as the city council do not feel appropriate, then we have the ability to exercise our appointment powers. In addition, the land trust as a public body is subject to the Open Meetings Act, and members of the public, including ourselves, are allowed to, of course, attend the meetings, otherwise review the minutes of the meetings, which is a level of transparency that would be impractical for many of the departments. We can't have public minutes of every single meeting when a director is meeting with different folks, but here it is a public body where we appoint members, and they're also subject to the same oversight structure as to any purchase going through the purchasing department for under 2,500, going through the city council for purchases of over 2,500. To also answer as to the concern of why now? Why is it that the budget should be increased from $400 to $4,900? Well, the land trust, it has a lot of very enthusiastic, very knowledgeable appointees to it who are hardworking, but they're not able to fulfill their mission and use their time and talents to the best of their ability if they're not able to get some of these reports and the like, such as appraisals or title searches or the like. I've, over the last couple of years or so, at least a couple of different members of the land trust have reached out to me from time to time. I have some experience in real estate law and the like. And so as an attorney and as a member of the city council, I cannot provide them with a legal opinion. I'm not the person to do that. I've made that very clear, but I'm happy to sit down with people and do a quick look in land evidence records and to say, while this is not a legal opinion, these may be some issues that you want to check into try to point folks in the right direction. That's absolutely not a substitute for formal legal advice, for a formal title search. At a title search, it's really not that expensive. We could be talking about $200-300 perhaps, but the difference between them getting that title search done or not is the difference between being able to identify at an early stage whether it's appropriate to be looking at a particular property for potential purpose, or moving on saying that property, too many issues, or that property, for whatever reason, it just does not make sense for us to proceed, versus identifying those different properties that it would make sense to give it that detailed evaluation and take it to the next step and propose a purchase or propose a different type of transaction, perhaps a conservation easement while the property remains in private hands, any sort of different action that the land trust may find appropriate to take, and of course subject to the various approvals. So for those reasons, I think that this money would be subject to the appropriate oversight and is reasonably necessary for them to put their time and talents to use that we've appointed them to do so.
So the main concern I have, besides whatever the administration feels, because I'm curious, because they're the ones who have interacted with the land trust regularly via the planning department, is the email states that they would like to have the money for, among other things, the ability to bid on properties. That's worrisome for a lot of reasons, mainly because if they were successful in that bid, it's not their problem what happens next. It's ours, the city's, and who has to pay for it and who has to maintain it. So that's rather worrisome as far as the intent to bid on that, but I'm not sure. I assume they're not here to address that. But that's all I got.
Thank you. Councilman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to just inform the council that I served on the land trust until my swearing in on the council. And one of the first things you do when then Councilwoman Vella Wilkinson asked me to serve upon the recommendation of then Council President Travis Vella Wilkinson, Councilwoman Vella Wilkinson recommended Travis, is I looked up the duties of the land trust. And as much as I am supportive of the land trust and I understand the land trust's duties, it is very simple. It's stated very simply in the charter and also on our page. Review of requests for land transfers, recommendations to City Council for land acquisitions, recommend to City Council land design as open space, and finally, professional staff support, thus the grant writing, thus the bidding, provided by the Warwick Planning Department. And that was originally going to be my original statement, that this falls under the City Planning Department. This is a commission or a body that meets once a month, if that, with a very clear statement of what their duties are. The other concern I have is if we look at the 2022 budget and the 2022 year-to-date, professional services is over their budgeted amount. So I don't think that this is, I understand that what the administration or what Councilman Gebhardt said about the administration, but at a time where we have so many services, and I've been to many city planning meetings, and this department is one of the busiest departments. I'm not taking away from the other departments, but when it comes to the planning and the growth of this city and the investment that outside entities are making into the city, we need the city planning department to be fully funded what they recommended. But I will end it with, personally, there has been some in my eyes, and I say this respectfully to my former colleagues on the quite a bit of overstep when it comes to the land trust and that body. By going out and seeking bonds and coming to the council and indicating that they want multi-million-dollar bonds for something that quite frankly is an operation that is outside the scope of what the land trust is, speaking as a former member, appointed member of the land trust, but that falls in the realm of the city planning department. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Gephardt.
I think it's worth just reviewing what this amendment was. So this amendment directs $4,000 to support the activities of the land trust. That's 4,000, 4000. And then just to go to the charter, I appreciate my colleague reading from the webpage of the land trust, but if we go to the Warwick City Charter, we can get a much fuller description of what the activities and mission of the land trust is. And if you go to section 5156, powers and duties, included in the the 8 points there, I'll start at number 4. Recommend possible uses for significant parcels of open space, land or owned to be owned by the city, including but not limited to, et cetera, et cetera. Employ counsel, auditors, engineers, surveyors, appraisers, private consultants, advisors, secretaries, or other personnel needed to perform its duties, provided, however, that expenditures authorized in the land trust budget, which are less than $2,500, may be made in conformity with municipal and state purchasing laws and with the advice and consent of the planning director. So, I mean, I think any statement that this is outside of what the authority and the original intent of the land trust is just not supported by the statute or by the charter. And so I would ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to clarify, the motion that was made and second was for $4,500. Yes. At this time, I'd like to ask the administration if they would like to weigh in on this, and then give the council people another opportunity to speak. And this evening, the public hearing has been closed, so it's just the council and the administration this evening.
Oh, it's working. First, to address your concerns, Councilman Lattiser. I'm not aware of any action that the board took. I was contacted by one member requesting this maybe a month ago. I'm not aware of any action to take. I spoke to Director Kravitz today. He said that the money is in the planning budget already, and the resources are given to the land trust, who we truly support as it's needed. I don't really see a need to transfer this money over there. I don't know what purpose it would serve. I'd rather keep everything under the planning department, because we do have a great planning department. They're very supportive and in favor of responsible acquisition of open space.
Thank you. Any council members who haven't had a chance to discuss this would like to speak at this time? Okay, Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chairman Howe, thank you for your comments. And also Mayor Picozzi, as well as Councilman Gephardt. It further supported, in my mind, the rationale for not supporting this change. I can see issues coming up when you have two venues that may be going down separate paths or different paths. And I can see just a whole lot of issues that could come up. And I agree with Chairman Howe and the mayor. I think this belongs in the planning department and should remain under their purview. Thank you.
I must respectfully disagree, and I hope that by discussing some of the history of the land trust and reading from section 51-51 of our Code of Ordinances, that some of my colleagues may reconsider their position. So to give a brief background on why we as the city council may care whether the land may be held in the name of the land trust or in the name of the city of Warwick. Well, land that is held by the city of Warwick, there is a much greater ability for the city to, at will, be able to sell that land to a third party or otherwise use or develop that land. However, if it is held by the land trust, then there are further protections that protect it from being sold to a third party, and that includes whether the city is doing that of its own free act and deed, or if the city is at some unknown point, hypothetically, purely hypothetically in the future, if the city were to lose control over making certain decisions of its own. An example of that would be bankruptcy, where the city may be forced by a third-party receiver to sell land, all of this being hypothetical. Then, if the land is in the name of the city, it may be subject to sale. If the land is in the name of the land trust, then it may have some additional protections. Again, strictly hypothetical there. But beyond that, the main distinction between holding land in the name of the city versus holding land in the name of the trust is that purpose of conservation. And so that leads me to section 51-51, establishment, as part of the Code of Ordinances. And this is all pursuant to enabling legislation that the General Assembly passed back in the year 2000 on the request of the City Council and the administration. I believe both the City Council and the administration supported it way back in the year 2000. I wasn't very much involved in politics at the time. I was, I believe, a freshman in high school at the time. But I'll briefly just read that paragraph, establishment, where it outlines the purpose is more specifically outlined in the next paragraph. I won't bore you all with that. You can certainly look it up for yourselves. I'll briefly read section 51-51 now. Pursuant to Public Laws, Chapter 2000-060, the City of Warwick, hereafter called the City, is hereby authorized to establish and amend, by ordinance, the Warwick Land Trust, hereafter called the Trust, a body politic and corporate and a public instrumentality. The Trust shall have the authority to acquire, hold, and manage real property and interest therein, including development rights and easements, situated in the city, consisting of open, residential, agricultural, recreational, historical, and littoral property, including existing and future well fields and aquifer recharge areas, freshwater marshes, water bodies, and adjoining uplands, wildlife habitats, land or buildings providing access to or views of water bodies, or for bicycling and hiking paths, or for future public recreational use, and land for agricultural use or airspace thereof, with the exception of property acquired for public historical preservation, research and/or educational, public access or recreational purposes. The trust shall hold all property or development rights solely as open space, or for agricultural uses, or for water protection purposes, or for public access, or to prevent the accelerated residential or commercial development thereof in perpetuity, as the trustees may determine. End quote. And so I believe that this also may help to address a concern of Councilman Sinapi that he had raised earlier. It is my understanding that the land trust, as its own separate entity, as created by the General Assembly and the City Code of Ordinances, it may hold land in its own name, and any liabilities associated with the land, those would fall on the Warwick Land Trust. Now, that's not exactly bulletproof, considering that the Warwick Land Trust, although a separate entity, it does obviously receive funding from the City of Warwick. So like any piece of public property, there may be some liabilities associated with it, but I would say that the city has an awful lot of paper roads, and we're not in a hurry to go and sell all of our paper roads for fear that one of the abutting property owners might just wander onto a paper road and have a slip and fall or the like. So I don't think that liability concerns alone are necessarily a reason why we should refuse to be buying land. I'm not saying that you're going in that direction, but simply pointing out my own opinion on that. Thank you.
Thank you. So it has been moved and seconded, so I think we've had a good debate on this. So the clerk will call the roll. The amendment would be moving $4,500 from 60360 professional services to 60388 land trust. The favorable action has been moved and seconded, so a yes vote is for favorable action. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
No.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
No.
Mr. Lattiser?
No.
Mr. McElroy?
No.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? No. Ms. Travis?
No.
3 yes, 6 no. Amendment fails.
Amendment fails. Thank you. Councilman Gephardt, do you have any additional amendments at this time?
Can I move $1? I'm just kidding. No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Sinapi.
So I'd like to propose to move from line 63-290 on page 43. That's Public Works Highway. Line item is asphalt. And move $120,000 to line item 89-000. That's School Department Appropriations. It's on page 56. And move the entirety to that line, so the entire $120,000.
Okay, that is the amendment. Do we have a second to that amendment? Second by Councilman Howe, Councilman McElroy, Councilman Foley. Go ahead, Councilman Sinapi.
Mr. President, may I ask he repeat the numbers for me again?
Sure.
Please? Thank you. Thank you, Councilman.
63-290 is the first line item on page 43. And that's $120,000 from that line item to page 56, line item 89-000. And that's School Department Appropriation. And that would move the entire $120,000 to that line item.
Okay, it's been moved in second, so go ahead, Councilman Sinapi.
So I heard from various residents about certain things that are being cut, and I reached out to the school department and asked if they were able to get additional funds, what would be their first choice, or at least the one that we could actually afford to address. And the response was TAs, specifically the TAs at the co-taught elementary school for second grade, because they did have to cut a number of those. And that lines up with what I had heard from residents who had reached out asking to be advocated on for exactly those. So not only does it line up nicely, but it happens to be some of the kids that are most in need, because the TAs help with, among other things, kids with special needs. And given the learning recovery that has to go on because of COVID, the more we can help out in that regard, the better. It doesn't restore all the TAs that were cut, but it at least takes a fraction of them, and it will help the remaining that were cut at the job fair, because it'll be that much less other people that have to compete with it. So silver lining. Quite you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on the amendment? Councilman Foley.
Thank you. I support this amendment on a number of grounds. One is, in my mind, based on my experience in the classroom, my wife is a former Warwick TA, and I have numerous friends still in the profession. The biggest bang for the buck in a classroom sometimes is the TA. They make a fraction of what a teacher makes, but they do almost immeasurable work within that classroom. A good TA is like another teacher in that classroom at a fraction of the cost. So if we can restore two, that's a start. I'm sad that so many had to get cut from the original budget, but they do good work, and working with the teacher, that TA is helping this student, but that student there is paying attention. They're an extra set of eyes watching what's going on in the classroom, keeping students focused. Just that hand on the shoulder to remind them to get back to work. If you're a teacher in the front of the room, yes, teacher-student ratio might be 12-1, but Mr. Howell and I both know that's not to mean I only have 12 students I'm watching. Sometimes it's 29, 25. And if I can have an extra set of adult eyes in that classroom to simply keep them on task. We talk about test scores, improving test scores. That does so much good to improve those test scores. Again, just having the set of eyes, never mind actually helping with the classwork itself. So I fully support the amendment, and I will be voting for it.
Thank you. Councilman Ricks.
Thank you. I agree with Councilman Foley, and I would like to thank Councilman Snappy for his leadership on this. I do have concerns about cutting the asphalt budget, but between the two, I do think that this is worth it. And I would also say that certainly my vote is not contingent here. There is no, not contingent on finding another source of money for the paving budget, but I do intend to introduce an amendment that would increase the paving budget. So I'll just leave that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't dispute or disagree with the needs for the TA in the classrooms. I certainly understand the rationale and reasoning and the value of all of that and appreciate that. What concerns me is the city is already increasing this budget by $4.9 million. In the last 7 years, the last 3 years, the school department's budget has increased by almost $8 million. In the last 10 years, the school population has declined by about 1,800 students. It might even be a tad more. To me, it makes no sense that the school department, the administration, cannot produce $120,000 for these positions out of the $4.9 million that the city is moving over to the school department. Talking about $4.9 million of taxpayer dollars. Almost $8 million in the last 3 years. And they can't find $120,000 to fund these positions for the TA. It doesn't make any sense to me. That makes no sense whatsoever. I say it's on the school administration. Fund the TAs, come up with your $120,000 out of the $4.9 million the taxpayers are already turning over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This gives me a bad taste, and I was trying to be really good this year. But we all know, and I've said it a million times, that, we write the check. We can't tell them where to put the money. They never once say, all right, we're going to use it just for this. We can't tell them to do that. They do what they want with the money. So only thing we can do is give them a line item. We could give them a little more, which we're gonna, or we give them less, but we still can't tell them what to do with it. So for them to say, oh yeah, this money's going to the 2 TAs, and believe me, I'm a big supporter that those 2 TAs are very important. But who's to say they're gonna do that? They might use it for something else. Because they've done it many of times, year after year, as I sat here. And I know it's a different administration, and that's good. The 4.9 million, I thought it was too much as it is. 1.2 of that money is not even, it's coming from the other money, opera money. We're not going to have that money next year. So that's that whole part that's going to be eliminated next year. But when they start their budget next year, they're going to have this all included from this point on. That'll be all included as their new base. I'm not sure. I really supportive of the TAs. I know we need more teachers. I personally would love to see us go back where we were when people moved to Warwick because of the Warwick schools. People moved to Warwick because we had some of the best special ed programs. And we all know, they're moving out. We got less kids. We got less buildings to take care of. But yet the money keeps going up and up and up and up. And I didn't speak on the school department the other night about, I heard they bought trucks or something. And what is that? And I heard they paid for the trucks. We don't pay for our trucks. We have to do lease purchase. So where did they get the money for the trucks compared to the education that we're trying to get out? I know they need all the stuff. I know there's fixed income. But at the same time, there's no guarantee you're going to get 2 TAs. And as much as I think I know we need it, and I would love to support it, I'm not sure because I'm not guaranteed that we're going to get it because we've seen in the past, at least this year, they said they won't take sports. But if we said we weren't going to give them 4.9, they would take music. They would take art. They would take something so the parents and the kids could get mad. And right now, this is great because nobody's mad right now. But the 2A, the 2 TAs, they are important. But I know for sure that that's where the money was going. I would support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Gephardt.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to comment. I would echo the sentiments of Councilwoman Travis. We vote on a block of money. With all due respect, it's not our prerogative to make specific positions available or to add to specific line items in their budget. I did attend all of the budget hearings, and I do have several thoughts on where $120,000 could come from. But again, I don't think that's our role. One thing worth considering in the presentation that was handed to us, out-of-district tuitions, $12 million at approximately $20,000 per student. I would certainly support spending the summer trying to recruit some of those Pathways kids back to Warwick. It would take 6 of them, and we would have this position funded. So again, I think the administration put a lot of hard work into the budget. We've spent hours over this process talking about paving, infrastructure, roads, all very important, as are schools. Believe me, my kids are in the school. I see some of the challenges, but we have no certainty of where this money will be spent. And I think that there are ample opportunities, if this is a priority for the school department, for them to fund it through their own means. So thank you.
Councilman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to I agree with everything Mr. Foley said, and there's a lot of things running through my mind about, you know, where a TA is a benefit, but also when I look back at I harp on unfunded mandates. One of them that the doctor of curriculum said was they have a new program coming, and I can just visualize, I can see it. And please understand, I am speaking as someone in the profession, and I mean this sincerely. When it comes to anything construction, anything building regulation, when Councilman Lattiser speaks, I listen. Equally, when education is spoken in the city of Warwick, when Councilwoman Travis speaks, I listen. But the challenges that students and the benefit that a TA can bring, a well-resourced TA can bring to the students, and how it can affect a classroom is I want to support this. I want to also address, and believe it or not, I was 100% on board. And when Councilwoman Travis spoke, I thought, "Ooh, good point." But at the same time, I'm thinking this new administration, and Councilwoman Travis, you are absolutely right. In the past, and I'm going to use the key word, please bear with me. In the past, and I think everyone knows, like Councilwoman Travis and I would throw the red ball back to each other, like, you know, the questions we would ask the school administration. I've been very encouraged with this current administration, but I would also like to put Chairwoman Cobden on the spot and ask you directly, if that's okay, Mr. President. No?
Sorry, the
No one
public
can
hearing
speak
is
from the,
over.
okay. I would say that I would support this, or I will support it, but I will be keeping an eye to ensure that the money and those two TA positions are in there. And the reason why I'm doing it is I know what a well-funded classroom and a classroom that is fully supported can do for students and the test scores and the overall learning environment of a classroom. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to have the administration come up, and if they would like to say anything on this proposed amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're going to remain Switzerland on this one. I just want to speak to transferring the money out of that account. We can find a way to replace it with ARPA funds. It doesn't mean that there'll be any less paving done this year. We have an amount set aside for optimum conditions to do a lot of paving. Councilman Ricks talked about upping that amount this year. We couldn't physically spend the money this year. You can only do so much in a season. It's been a reduced season because we had to go back out to bid. We've just done that recently. So we haven't adequate enough money to do our projected roads this year. It would be impossible to do it. It's going to be a little tricky and difficult to replace this money in this line item, but we've been talking back there and we think we can find a way. So it'll be the council's pleasure on this one, and the roads are still going to get paved.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to give Councilman Snappy the last word. Are there any other members? Councilman Foley.
I want to compliment the bookend, as I call him, Mr. Councilman Gephardt, jokingly and with, sincerity. You had a great idea about recruiting some of those students back that we've lost to recoup some of the money in state aid that follows those students. I'm not trying to make it pot. I'm voting for this amendment, as I've stated already. But as a challenge to the school leadership, the administration, the school committee, is I would like, if they could, develop a plan for this summer to actively contact and recruit those students that have left our district over the last year or so, and to show us, I'm not holding them, I'm just asking, it's an ask, show us what that plan looks like, that's A. But B, going to Councilwoman Travis, and I agree with you, we have no authority to say this is what you have to use that money for. I'm doing it in a leap of faith because on my short tenure back here, I do like the responsiveness and the transparency of the school leadership. and I have faith in that. But it would do so much to foster the goodwill of the city council that if they could show that they have recouped, Councilman Gephardt, I think, quoted the number at $20,000 per student. So if we were able to recruit back simply 4, I'll round it up, 4 students, and that with that $80,000 that now has come back into the school department budget, that is not, directly from opera funds or extra reimbursement from the state, that they hired one more TA back with money they found. Again, a good faith showing is never a bad thing. Thank you for letting me speak again.
Thank you. Councilman Ricks.
I think that there have been many years where the relationship between the city council and the school committee and school department has been not the best. I think that in more recent years, we've really been able to repair that relationship to a large degree. And I think that in the most recent set of controversies where it was ultimately resolved by the school committee providing us with a list of, okay, if we receive funding at X level, here is the priority list. This is what we are agreeing to do. And then they followed through on that when the city council gave them that additional appropriation. And so, yes, it is a matter of trust. I hope it isn't so much a matter of a leap of faith, but I can appreciate that too. I think that a show of goodwill, I think that if this is something that we can support, I think that the school committee and school department, through their transparency this year and their goodwill this year, and further with the administration having reviewed the budget of the school department, engaged in those in-depth talks. And I would like to applaud the administration and the school department for coming together and finding the funding to get to the budget as to where it is right now. So I think for all of those reasons, I'm willing to go out there and trust that if we make this appropriation, then the school committee is going to follow through and use that money as they state that they intend to use it. And you know what? If they don't, then we're going to know better next year. And it's going to really affect the relationship to the tune of a lot more than the proposed amount right now, because next time we're going to be questioning everything with their budget, as we do normally. We, of course, have to provide a thorough review of everything in the budget, but if we can't trust them to follow through on this year, then that wouldn't speak well of our relationship in future years. And so I think that because it is a relationship, this is not a transactional sort of thing where the parties, we all go our own way after this. No, it's a continuing relationship. The school department is always going to be here. City council is always going to be here. I think that it is appropriate for us to trust their word. And so if, I would encourage my colleagues, if you think that this is an appropriate appropriation, then let's show a little trust and see this through. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we can sit here and we can talk about trust. We can talk about all these other things. I can tell you this. It's pretty disappointing to me that between the school committee and the administration, that they were not able to come up with some cuts to take care of this problem. This $120,000 amount of monies that if it's not approved, these TAs are going to be eliminated or they're not going to be hired. out of $175 or $6 million budget. That is really disappointing to me, that it has to come down to a vote of the city council to move monies around in the budget so that these youngsters are not going to be deprived of a TA. I think between the school committee and the administration, I believe it was their responsibility to make sure that those items were funded. It's very difficult to deny these positions, but it's very disappointing to me that it wasn't taken care of in the school department and the school committee's side of the business deal. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to give Councilman Sinapi the last voice. Councilman Sinapi.
So I'll just run through a quick list here. No one's at least more familiar with the whole trust issue as I. Actually, that's not fair. Some of you have been here longer. At least more recently with the explicit issues with trust, because I had the vote of no confidence, if you recall, for the finance director years ago. And then, despite that, within only a year or two of it, we ended up fixing the trust and the relationship, and we got them to spend a huge chunk of money in the manner that was in line with what our expectations were as well. And that's what the prior superintendent. We've heard nothing but good things regarding the new superintendent, and many of us had already had plenty of interactions with her in her previous role anyway. I don't think it's fair to even imply the possibility of problems with her, given that they haven't happened yet. Same with the school committee chair, who, quite the opposite, we've had plenty of pleasant experiences with, including last year's budget. And it should be known that as far as recruiting back students, bear in mind many of them are leaving for specialized sports programs. In fact, the council member for one of those cities always brags to me, and I give him crap for it, because it's very frustrating to lose students just because, oh, my friend plays on blah, blah, blah team over there. The system is beyond abysmal. But that being said, sure, it would be great to pull back students, especially regarding all the renovations that are occurring and soon, hopefully, new schools. That being said, we also can lose and have lost students if we are unable to provide the services required, let's say, by their IEP. And one of the services that you'll maybe not often, well, often enough, based on how I hear it, is one-on-one or the addition of a TA for that student, because they need that there, whether it be for behavioral issues or otherwise. So when you lose TAs, you potentially lose students. And they're not students that just, they just went somewhere else. Like, no, the money travels with them if you're unable to provide the services. And so they have to go somewhere else. The money goes with them, just like it does with the sports ones. And bear in mind, so they've already made many cuts, to put it lightly. They've already found many millions of dollars, such as by doing grants. They've cut many things that they wouldn't want to cut. They changed the walking distances, which many of us have already heard about. People are not terribly thrilled on, but they had to find a way. Our own administration, I believe, has already been noted as saying the budget is extremely lean. You heard from the new person on finance of the school committee that the budget is extremely lean. Those of us who have reviewed it, line by line, it is extremely lean. They cut things from stuff that it's going to be interesting how they can manage it, but they did it because that's what made the budget work, given what they had. I mean, they had over 6.2 million in increases that they couldn't do anything about, and we're giving them less than that. So, I mean, this is math. We're already making out a good deal overall. So, giving an extra 120 to bring back 2 jobs that could value-wise get us even more than that. Not to mention, it's 2 jobs as a people. It matters. And I don't really think there's a reason not to give the money under these circumstances, given that The administration has no objection. Everything about this budget process with the school department and the school committee has gone swimmingly. They've been very open. They've responded to all requests. They brought an army to the budget meeting, and they've addressed some requests and questions that some out of left field and some in more detailed ways than they ever were able to before. So we're getting everything we wanted and more on their end, and the least we can do is give a tiny amount more than we already are.
Thank you. One more, this is the third time, one more, Councilman Lattiser.
Just a final request. So my information has it that the school department is having or has had difficulties hiring subs. Now, with that said, if this appropriation were approved, I would like to request from the administration that the city council is notified when the TAs are hired and how many TAs are hired. I think that's a reasonable request, particularly given the fact, at least what I'm told, is that there's difficulties in hiring subs. So I would like to have the administration notify us when these TAs are in fact hired. Thank you.
Thank you. So the amendment has been moved and seconded. It is for to take from line item 63,290 asphalt, $120,000, and place that same amount into line item 89,000 schools. The clerk will call the roll for favorable action. Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
No.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Snappy? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no, amendment passes.
Thank you. The amendment passes. Councilman Sinapi, do you have any additional amendments you'd like to offer at this time?
I believe that is all.
Okay. Are there any other amendments members of the city council would like to make at this time? Councilman Ricks.
Yes. So before I formally make the amendment, I would just want to draw this to the attention of the administration. I believe that Library Director Stevenson may have contacted the administration regarding the funding of the additional positions. So I wasn't sure if the administration had calculated the numbers on that or otherwise reviewed that.
I did have communication last night, actually, with the library director. That first of all, the head count is correct in the personnel supplement, and it's correct that it was short funded by what I would say, and I said to her, not a material amount of money. We've been through this with all the departments. People, they can't fill vacancies, a lot of departments. There's a lot of vacancies. As a matter of fact, the director's position is going to be vacant, I guess. So that I didn't feel that the dollar amount that they were talking about for the aides, they've got authorization through the personnel supplement for those positions. I was comfortable that they're going to be able to cover that without having to add any money to the department. So that's where we left it.
Thank you,
That's-
Councilman
that's what I
Ricks.
told her.
Thank you. I wanted to, so I just want to make sure that we have assurances on the record that these line items would not need to be amended. And so it was my understanding from the budget hearing presentation on Tuesday evening that there was the intention for the library to add the two full-time library aides. So that would be moving from a total of 5 positions to 7 positions. And also per the personnel supplement, adding 1 position of the part-time shelver, so going from 5 positions to 6 positions. And this is my math. I'm obviously not the finance director, and I don't pretend to be an expert accountant or anything like that. But my rough math, and
Councilman, I just want to, if you can answer directly, we're supposed to have
sure.
amendments
I'll-
and then seconds, so we're not really supposed to have another budget hearing here.
thank you. I'll hurry it up. For the record, from the administration is comfortable that these positions may be filled under the current budget without the need for the city council to make an amendment.
That was my position with her, and I talked briefly with the mayor's staff this morning on it. I just really, the materiality of this and what I know right now, they used extra money from vacancies to do work in the library this past, and it's been hard to keep positions filled. So if we were talking $200,000, I would, and there's been a real commitment, I would say make an amendment to the budget, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about part-time positions. They're authorized in the list. I really don't think it's necessary to make an appropriation change. We've met our maintenance of effort with the state with that library, and I've been a big supporter of the library. The mayor has, but I don't really think it's necessary to make an amendment.
My rough math is that it would be a total of $93,810, which is certainly a lot less than $200,000. The administration appears to be comfortable with this, so therefore I would not see a need to offer that particular amendment. I would have one other amendment that I would wish to offer, but first I would defer to any other members of the council if they desire to make any other amendment at this time.
Okay. Are there any members of the council who'd like to make an amendment at this time? Any other members of the council who'd like to make any budget amendments at the time? All right, Councilman Ricks.
Thank you. So this is going to be a rather controversial amendment, but I do see it as necessary.
And please just
so
read
that we
the
can-
amendment
yes.
first. We'll
So-
get a second, and then you can go into detail.
And I would appreciate a second for discussion if possible. This would involve line item the property tax revenue line item, which is 100-3100. So this is the largest source of revenue, of course, the property tax revenue. It is currently at $231,298,952. I would propose to increase that by the amount of $4 million, which would represent a tax increase of slightly less than 2%. I would defer to the administration as to any precise number, and I would propose to using that $4 million, increase by $4 million, line item 75-196, OPEB trust funding, which is currently at $250,000. And if I receive a second for discussion, I can explain the purpose.
Okay, thank you very much. So the councilman has made a amendment looking to increase the budget by $4 million?
Correct.
$4 million. Is there a second to that motion? Go ahead. On the mic.
So that would cause an increase in the tax rate and the dollar amount of what per household?
40 cents. 40 cents per thousand.
For 1,000.
I'm sorry, it's 10 cents per million. So 4 million would be 40 cents, roughly.
And before we go any more, is there a second to the motion Councilman Ricks has made? Is there a second to the motion? Hearing none, the amendment was not seconded, and therefore the amendment fails. Councilman Ricks, do you have any additional amendments to offer at this time?
I do not.
Thank you. Are there any other amendments members of the council would like to make at this time? Are there any other amendments the council would like to make at this time? Okay, hearing none, PCR 65-22 has been moved and seconded. So we got to do the amendment first? Or no, because it's the same number? Oh, the amendment has been approved. So if we have anyone, Councilman Howe?
Move to close public hearing comment.
No, we already moved the proposal to close. We're looking for a motion for favorable action on PCR 65-22.
Thank you. I am looking for a motion of favorable action on PCR 65-22.
Second by Councilman Foley, Councilman Gephardt. Are there any additional questions on PCR 65-22 related to transfers, supplemental appropriations, and emergency appropriations? Hearing none, the clerk will call a roll for favorable action.
Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
No.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis? Yes. 8 yes, 1 no.
Thank you. PCR 65-22 is adopted. Next up this evening is PCR 66-22, a resolution adopting the budget and setting the tax rates of the City of Warwick for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2022 and ending June 30th, 2023. Committee report, Finance.
Favorable action.
For action, Councilman Howe.
Move favorable action.
Second by Councilman Foley and Councilman Gephardt. Are there any questions or comments at this time on PCR 66-22? Any comments on the budget itself as a whole? Councilman Ricks.
A brief comment. I am very concerned about the structural deficit this year. From an article in the Beacon, I believe that the mayor stated that based on the ARPA funds, there's a structural deficit of approximately $7 million there. I don't mean to misquote or anything like that, but that was my understanding from looking at that article. The article states by, quote, structural deficit budget, quote, Picosi is recognizing that about $7 million is in federal funding for operations that won't be available next year, end quote. Again, that quote is from the Warwick Beacon. I certainly understand, being in a position myself, that when things are characterized in the paper, we must sometimes take it with a grain of salt. So at the same time, taking a look at my own calculations, just going through the capital budget, looking at items that in normal years where federal funding is not available, there are many different functions that we're using the ARPA funds to cover, such as if you look only at replacement of various vehicles, purchases of various vehicles, and the $3 million for fiscal year 2023 for paving, you add up those numbers for fiscal year 23 alone, and that's $5.7 million. If we pass the tax rate as it is this year, as I imagine that we will, that will make 4 of the last 5 years with a 0% tax increase. At the same time, salaries, benefits continue to rise. We have additional costs due to inflation, such as gasoline, diesel, natural gas, electric. We have additional costs due to debt service of the various bonds. We have a lot of different areas where costs continue to increase, not to mention OPEB. We unfortunately also have long-term issues with paying for long-term liabilities, items that have been agreed to under contracts. And it is my opinion that this city council and this city has an obligation to uphold its promises and its contractual commitments to our employees in their retirement. Between all of that, both the short term and the long term here, when I'm looking at on those items alone, 5.7 million in ARPA funds this year, and really upwards of that, as well as, and this is, by the way, the reason I named the number of the $4 million, because the city in the fiscal year 23 budget is projecting $4 million one-time sale of city properties. When we sell a property, we get the money once, we can't sell the same property twice. So that's $4 million of revenue for fiscal year 23 that we're using to balance the fiscal year 23 budget that's not going to be available in fiscal year 24. I'm afraid that in fiscal year 24, or once the ARPA funds run out, we're going to hit a fiscal cliff. The maximum that we can raise with a maximum of 4% tax increase is about $9 million, more or less. So if we have a structural deficit of well in excess of $9 million, then even with a maximum tax increase, we're going to be feeling a lot of pain where we have to cut a lot of services. And I don't want to see the city in that kind of position where we are both making severe cuts to city services and imposing a very high tax increase in 1 year. That is why, unfortunately, I cannot support a 0% tax increase in this year. So unfortunately, that is the reason why I must vote against the tax rate being set at the same level as last year, and why I just voted against the budget in the previous vote. I hope that I am wrong. I really do. And I wish that we could sustain 0% tax increases. But looking at the numbers, I just don't see how that is sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I'm sure all of you have, I've spent a lot of time, put a lot of thought into this budget. And I've also given a lot of thought to the long-term financial responsibilities to the taxpayers. Nobody wants to raise taxes. The administration doesn't want to raise taxes. We don't want to raise taxes. No one wants to raise taxes. The taxpayers don't want to see taxes raised. And also, all of our residents have come to appreciate and rightfully expect the services that the city provides. And it costs money to do that. I also know in my 40 plus years of being in business, not increasing my prices is not sustainable. I have received information, I should say, from our previous experience. I believe that of the last 5 budgets, including this one, have been a no tax increase budget. The last 4. Not in succession, but 4 of the 5. In my world, if I had gone 4 years in a row, or 4 out of 5 years without raising my prices, I would have been out of business. Because you can't do that. And again, the pain, there's always pain when you have to raise taxes. I truly believe that the people we represent don't get angry when their taxes are raised per se. They get angry with how we spend their hard-earned tax dollars. That's where people get angry. And I commend Mayor Picozzi and his administration for all the efforts in presenting this budget. I know there's a lot of work put into this, a lot of time. It's a monumental task. And as I said the other evening, we listened to 2 days of hearings where we talked about trends, projections, history, forecasts. We're in a very, very unique position, very unique financial position. We have the luxury of significant financial windfalls because of the opera money, COVID money, call it whatever you want. And I do believe that the lion's shares of this monies go to a one and done expense. But I'm also concerned about the impacts of another no tax increase budget over the next 3, 4, 5 years. We've been together on this council, some of us in the whole 10 years. Actually, it's Councilwoman Travis and myself for my 10 years on the council. And over the last several years, I've made the requests for that forecast, that 5-year forecast. I felt it was particularly important for us this year. Because with all good intentions, with everyone's good intentions, it's very difficult to set a path forward if you don't have some reasonable directions and some reasonable insight. It was mentioned the other night that the actuaries were going to be coming before us at some point in the near future. Would have loved to heard from the actuaries before tonight. Next week, we're going to be back in this chamber to discuss voting on a $350 million bond, which I think we'll all agree could grow to $450 or $500 million. Where's that coming from? If that passes and gets to the ballot and it passes, where's that money coming from? Months ago, you heard me say on a Zoom meeting that I felt that question belonged on the ballot. I have no problem with admitting that I've reconsidered and revisited things. Without the numbers to tell the voters exactly what their costs are going to be on these items 4 and 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, it's going to make it very difficult to support some of these things. Until and when I say the administration, please understand I'm generalizing. This isn't directed at just the current administration, future administrations, future city councils. Until all of us have the desire to cut the spending, to reduce the cost of health care to the taxpayers, to increase the cap on those prescription drugs, to eliminate lifetime health care for new hires. Until the administrations here and going forward, and city councils going forward, until that particular problem is solved, you're not going to have $120,000 to bring in the TAs. $82% of the school department's budget goes to salaries, pensions, and healthcare costs. On the city side, we've got a very similar situation. Those costs just continue to rise. We listen to it every year. We've been hearing it long before I get on the council, but yet it continues to be in denial. For those reasons, I am not going to be able to
2 minutes,
support-
Councilman.
I am not going to be able to support this budget either. I am not voting no on a no tax increase. Let me make that clear. No one wants to vote no for no tax increase. My concerns are the unknown. And for those reasons, I'm not going to be able to support this budget. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilman, any additional questions from members of or comments from members of the council on PCR 66-22? I just would like to share that I am proud of this budget. There are major investments in our schools, on our infrastructure, in our neighborhoods, in our community access. I'm proud of this council. This council has worked together to address our aging fleet, our sanitation issues. We're fighting COVID and the impact it's had on our lives and in our government. In the next year, we're going to continue to see the city grow. There's going to be additional housing units, more businesses are coming in, more businesses are expanding. We're continuing to invest in our schools. We're continuing to invest in our infrastructure in our neighborhoods. So I want to thank this city council, this administration, and especially the residents for all working together to make our city a great city to live, work, and play in. So those are my comments. So the PCR 66-22 has been moved in its second. Yes vote is for favorable action. The clerk will call the roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
No.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
No.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
7 yes, 2 no.
Thank you very much. PCR 66-22 has passed. And that is all the business before us this evening. Everybody have a great night, and we will see you too. Do we need a motion to close? I will take a motion to close. Councilman Howe.
Motion to adjourn?
A second by Councilman McElroy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are officially closed. Thank you.